It was a beautiful day for a race, and so 40 plus of my fellow over 40 racers got together at the Greenville Spring Training Series on February 7th. You can see I'm following the wheel of Rodney Dender. He was the guy that was waving at us as we started off. And right now we're looking at lap number 2. And I'll explain why we're looking at lap number 2 and not any other lap as we come along. Stay with me because this particular lap is 18 minutes long. Actually, it's a little less than that, but this video is 18 minutes long. So I want to explain to you what you're looking at, then we'll talk a little bit about the race itself. First thing you'll notice is, well, we're looking at a race, and I have a forward-facing camera, that's what's right in front of you, and then a rear-facing camera that is synchronized with the front-facing camera, and that's down in the right-hand corner. There in the left-hand corner, you'll find wattage, speed, cadence, and my heart rate. And then across the top, you'll find the elevation. So we've got a little cutout there of the terrain that we'll be riding on at a place that I still call Donaldson Center, SCTAC, Aeronautic Center for South Carolina. And it's very interesting to see here as we're getting ready to go downhill. You can watch the riders as we descend. I think we're going to hit around 40 plus miles an hour. You can look up in the upper section and see that's taking place. And if you look ahead, you'll see where we start coming up. So that gives you some idea of how the elevation corresponds to the elevation cutout that you see going across the top. A little history here. This was my first race back in several years. When I broke my neck some time ago, I came back and I think I did 2 races. Didn't do well in either of them. Actually, I don't think I finished one of them, and the other one I just kind of finished the race out by myself. So I was a little bit scared coming into this one. I had been training as best I could, but I wasn't certain what was going to happen in this particular race. One of the things that worked in my favor was the team with the most riders was the trapdoor team. I think they had like 5 guys in the race, 4 or 5 guys. And so they were controlling it. Even if they weren't physically controlling the race, their presence basically kept anyone from doing anything. And it was actually quite frustrating. You can't tell it so much with the cameras here, but the field was slow. At least it felt very slow to me. And so you were doing a lot of dodging. It wasn't one of those where there was a nice, easy rhythm. There was a lot of freewheeling and people coming up on others. It didn't matter whether you were in the back or if you were in the front. There just wasn't a good rhythm in most of the race. That was frustrating, but it also allowed me time to recover. So had it been a very fast race, I don't know if I would have been able to do as well. But because of everything that was taking place, and I guess what they would call it negative racing, I was able to conserve a little bit more energy. We are in the second lap here. The first lap was pretty much, everybody warming up, though toward the end, as we were going into the final dip before the climb up to the finish, things started really stretching out. A break got away, and so at this moment we are climbing what is known as the golf course hill, as we're actually getting toward the top of it. And the break was established, at least the majority of it was established. I think 2 guys that got off in the initial break ended up coming back into the field. One of those guys was a trapdoor rider, and then Rodney, who, if you look down in the bottom, waving at us, bottom right hand side, he replaced it by bridging up to the gap, and that was the final break that finished the race. Now if you look up at the top, you'll see we're beginning to go downhill from the top of Golf Course Hill, and things begin to stretch out. This is a nice little section. You don't have to worry about anyone according back on you because we're going pretty fast at this point. The field ended up getting split into two. There was one point where I thought I was in the middle of the field. I looked behind me and I was dangling off the back. I mean, we were down to around 25 riders if you counted the break and you counted the field, and that was out of 41 or more. So things did get hard enough so that we dropped about half the field. But I didn't sense that as we were going through the race. I'll go ahead and explain to you what happened to me in the race. On the last lap, the 6th lap, I was feeling pretty good. At least I thought I was. And I got in behind one of the trapdoor guys, actually the one right there in the bottom right-hand corner. Chris, I think it's Nietzsche is how you pronounce his last name. Forgive me if I slaughtered that. But I wanted to get on his wheel and follow him with Darren Marhanka, who also is there in the bottom, coming out of the screen to our bottom right and is coming around me to the right. So there you see him in the red, black, and yellow. Those were the two guys I was kind of hoping I could grab a hold of their wheel and go toward the finish, because I knew that they would be strong on the sprint. However, as we were going down into the dip, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see there's a rise and then a little dip before the complete climb toward the end. Well, in that dip, you can get up some speed and carry that momentum up the other hill. And when I did that, I found myself moving up along the left side of a line that was stretched out on the climb going toward the sprint zone. Here, the sprint happens probably around 400 meters out. That's when things begin to happen. So as I found myself in that position, I kind of had a thought. I'm sure it was a crazy thought, but a thought came to my mind. What if I attacked with about 800 meters to go out of the field? That would put me in about, I think, 5th place at that point. I figured I wasn't going to win the sprint, but if I could get up enough speed, if I could get a surprise, get enough of a gap, get up enough speed, then I would make the guys have to work to come around me on the sprint. And I knew I wouldn't get 5th place, but wow, if I could get a top 10, that would be pretty cool. So I set my sights on a tree that I knew was well within the 1 kilometer to go distance. And I said, when I get to that tree, I'm going to attack. So sitting there in 10th place, I waited, made my move. As I look back at my data file, I can see that I spiked well over 800 watts at that point and was climbing. But it was about that time I began to feel an ache, if I could call it that, coming up in my left calf muscle. And then if you look at my wattage in the data, you see that it just drops because my left calf muscle just seized. It was like I was going down the road and I stuck a post down in the ground. I couldn't turn my leg. I mean, sometimes you get a cramp and you can kind of spin it out, but I must have been going at such, a hard pace that it just seized, and it was almost like my leg bounced. It didn't want to turn. It wasn't listening to what my brain was telling it to do. So I just threw up my hand and called out that I was off, and then pulled to the right to get out of everybody's way. And then I watched the field come around me on my left, and I was feeling pretty sick. I had a lot of mixed emotions at that point because I really knew I was in a place I knew I could have gotten a top 10, but then ended up with 24th. The finish certainly didn't, in my mind, speak to how I raced. I really felt like I did a pretty good job. I met my objectives, which were number 1 to start, number 2 to stay with the field, number 3 finish with the field. And I did all 3 of those things. So I met all of my objectives, but I went away from that race knowing I could have had a little bit more. So that's kind of a confidence builder, something to make me get out there and try this thing again. It was also kind of nostalgic because I used to race for the Trapdoor team, and I was watching those guys, working as a team, and there's a lot of fun in that. And being out there as just a single guy, not having someone to work with, what do you do? Because you don't have someone covering a break for you or getting in the break for you. Those things just don't happen. So racing by yourself is a whole different ballgame. And so I decided here on this second lap I was going to do something rather than just sit there and let those Trapdoor guys control everything. I was going to try to at least see if I could get the field back up to the break, and if I could do that, then maybe I could have a chance at the end or give the chance to somebody else. So you can see me moving up toward the front. My thought process was we were in a headwind at this point. We were getting ready to make a hard right turn, and that would put us in a crosswind from the left to the right. Now the guys in the break had to come through this headwind, and now they were going to get caught in a crosswind. So if I could get out there and work hard, and they were up there kind of resting on their laurels of being in the break, maybe I could begin to shut it down. So I saw this guy go off, and I was like, okay, maybe we can get something rolling here. And then obviously when he started looking back and then pulling over and soft pedaling, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So at that time I made up my mind I was going to go for it. Now they were in sight. They were just around the bend where these trees are. As we get finished with this long stretch, I was able to see the break in front of me. So they were rabbits for me to aim for. You can't see them, but they are out there, trust me. So I settled in, and looking back, I'm kind of amazed when I see the wattage that I was putting out. Not that that's a lot of wattage, don't get me wrong, but for me that's a lot of wattage, and for me to be doing it for that long was pretty amazing. I thought in my mind, because I wasn't looking at my computer, I thought in my mind I might be going 300 watts. But 400, nearly 400, 350 plus watts for the majority of this pool was kind of crazy for me. If you see the flags there, you'll see the crosswind, and I was pulling along, the idea being that I would pull and then move over, and hopefully the fact that I was pulling like that would have motivated someone else to come up and help, and that they would move in and take over for me. Ideally in this situation you would be wanting to have a pace line going, but based on the way the field was acting, I wasn't sure that was going to take place. So again, for better or for worse, I took it in my own hands. Here we're passing one of the junior racers. Those people weren't in our group. Now you can't see them, but I could see the field up, getting ready to go around this right hand turn down into what I call the dip. And It was around this point that I kind of looked back because you can notice my wattage was beginning to drop under 300 watts. I needed some help. So I moved over, looked back, and saw that the reason why no one was pulling through was because it was a trapdoor rider who was just riding my wheel. Also, looking back now, I can see that gaps had begun to form in the field. So we were stretched out pretty well. And you know what? That actually makes me feel pretty good. Maybe that 24th place doesn't make me feel good, but to be able to look and see what that pull was able to do to the field is pretty cool. So at this point, I was basically saying, as you can see, I'm over on the yellow line, somebody come around me because I'm not going to keep doing this. And that's where the guy right there in the, orange comes through. Now we're going into what I call the dip. We're getting near the end of this particular lap. Looking back at this video, it's kind of frustrating because I did all that work and now I look back and see people freewheeling, soft pedaling. Then I see Darren Marhanka come up. He says something to Chris. I'm not sure what it is. And then the next thing I know, he's coming around me. And we're a little bit out of sync, I think, on the video. But there goes Rodney Dender. So he took off to go up after the break. Darren's sitting there, we'll slow people down here and let Rodney get away, which he did, and ultimately Rodney made it up to the break. And the other trapdoor rider who was in the break came back to the field. Of course, Rodney going up after them, said to me, well, they're there. So if we could just get some people working, maybe we could put some damage into that gap between us and the break. Thought that would happen. One rider came up, but that was basically it. And before you knew it, I was back on the front. And to be honest with you, at this point, it just became a matter of pride. I say, hey, we're going to go through the start-finish line, and I'm going to be pulling this crew on our way through there. So you can see the wattage begin to tick back up toward 300 watts, and the speed hopefully will pick up here in a little bit, 24-25 miles per hour. And I pulled us through to the finish. I have to say, it was a lot of fun. Of course, when I say the finish, we were going into the third lap at this point. But it was fun, and glad that I was able to finish with the field. That's the first time I've been able to do that since I broke my neck. And I think I want to be coming back for some more races. Schedule won't allow for too many, but when I can, I think I'll go out there and join the guys. So here we go, cross the finish. Thanks for watching. As always, be sure to visit idoitfor.org and lowcadence.com.